Good morning, good afternoon, good evening, wherever it is in the world you're joining us from, and welcome to this RMI IFA webinar, The Journey to a Green Ammonia Future. This is part one on accelerating green ammonia purpose and priorities. My name is Lachlan, Carey. I'm a manager here at RMI in our US program, where I work on economic development issues primarily. And so that's the perspective I'm coming at this from. I'm possibly the least technical person perhaps in the webinar, and so I'm going to try and guide us through today's conversation in a way that really gets at understanding the technology, its future, and the implications for people and communities as well. We'd like to kick off today with Alzbeta Klein, who is the CEO and Director General of the International Fertilizer Association. In her role, she's leading the global fertilizer industry toward creating and supporting productive and sustainable agricultural systems. Ms. Klein led IFC World Bank Group's climate business, positioning IFC as a lead investor in green and ESG investments in emerging markets. Prior to that, she led IFC's agribusiness investments, industrial investments, and managed IFC's $50 billion investment portfolio in emerging markets. So with that, I'd kick this over to Alzbeta to introduce today's session.
Thank you very much, Lachlan, and welcome everyone to this first webinar of the new RMI IFA series dedicated to green ammonia. We are very pleased to have so many of you with us online today. As per introduction, I lead the International Fertilizer Association, the only global association of fertilizer producers, retailers, and distributors with almost 500 members in over 70 countries. My team and I are very pleased to collaborate with the Rocky Mountain Institute for this new webinar series that we call The Journey to a Green Ammonia Future. Our objective is to explore the drive towards sustainable ammonia and nitrogen fertilizer production today. We're starting with the first of the 5-part series where we will examine the purpose and priorities of the acceleration of lower carbon ammonia. Most of you will know the importance of ammonia for fertilizer production and by extension for global food security. But allow me maybe a quick refresher for those coming at this topic from another industry. What is ammonia and what is its link to sustainable food security? Similar to humans, plants require nutrients to grow and to be healthy. And nitrogen is one of those essential nutrients. It is, for instance, an important component of proteins. While nitrogen is abundant in the air, it's all around us. It is not available to plants in its original form from the air. The fertilizer industry manufactures ammonia, the main raw material for nitrogenous fertilizer production. Without nitrogen fertilizers, we could only produce about half the food we eat today. Now, to produce ammonia, it requires a lot of energy. And that is why nitrogen-based fertilizers are this bridge between energy and food security. When properly managed, nitrogen fertilizers help increase crop productivity. And in turn, you can do it in a way that minimizes greenhouse gas emissions and increases biodiversity by intensifying production and not converting certain land into agriculture. So the next question is, how is it produced today? Nitrogen fertilizers are primarily manufactured through the Haber-Bosch process, a method developed over 100 years ago. This process creates ammonia. Urea is the most commonly produced and consumed nitrogenous fertilizer, and the production of ammonia currently accounts for about 90% of the industry's energy consumption and 2% of the world's energy consumption. It also accounts for about 1.5% of global GHG emissions. So how can we produce ammonia differently? And how can it enable decarbonization of other industries? Decarbonizing ammonia production is a key priority for the industry as we seek to reduce emissions while maintaining food security. Green ammonia, which is produced by using renewable energy sources, is at the heart of this strategy. Lower carbon ammonia can also be achieved through carbon capture and storage. Now, while ammonia is an essential raw material for the fertilizer industry, it can also help other industries to decarbonize. For example, power industry through co-firing with ammonia, or shipping industry to substitute fossil fuels. So the question that we have ahead of us is there anything that a humble ammonia cannot do today? And this is what we are going to discuss today and in a coming series. Looking forward. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Alzbeta. I now have the pleasure of introducing my CEO, Dr. John Creyts, who is an internationally recognized leader on global energy issues and climate change. John joined the organization in 2012 and has managed the strategy and execution of RMI's global activities in multiple senior positions, becoming CEO in 2022. During his time at RMI, John has helped found RMI's China program and set up RMI's office in Beijing. He's worked on electricity transition issues, helping found eLab, researching technology disruption, and stewarding RMI's Business Renewable Center, which eventually spun out and became the Clean Energy Buyers Alliance. He conceived and built RMI's breakthrough technology accelerator, Third Derivative. Thank you so much, John.
Thank you, Lachlan, and thank you as well, Alzbeta. We're so happy with the partnership that we have here with IFA. A good morning, good afternoon, good evening to everyone here with us online. As Lachlan said, I'm John Creyts. I lead Rocky Mountain Institute, or RMI, as you'll hear us refer to throughout today's call. We're an independent, nonpartisan, nonprofit organization developing market-driven solutions to accelerate the clean energy transition, and more importantly, to improve lives. And just so you're familiar with us, we're a collection of about 700 global experts right now. And those are architects and engineers, business leaders and finance experts, entrepreneurs, scientists, and policy gurus, right? And all of that together, we collaborate with companies, communities, and foundations, government leaders around the world to secure a clean, prosperous, and zero carbon future for all. So think of us as an entity, a think and do tank that works at the intersection of markets, technology, and policy, that always focuses on the facts and uses some of our techno-economic analysis and whole systems thinking to unstick systems and help us get to better answers faster. And that really is the focus of today's conversation. As Alzbeta said, agriculture is extremely important when we talk about greenhouse gas emissions. As a system, it accounts for almost a quarter of global greenhouse gas emissions, making it one of the largest contributors to climate change. And a significant driver of these emissions is nitrogen-based fertilizers that are produced from ammonia. These, of course, lead to nitrous oxide, which as a greenhouse gas are about 300 times more potent than CO2. So we have to find ways to help manage those emissions and effectively get the food we need as well. This is the complex challenge, right? We have difficulties quantifying emissions and solutions. And in the process, we have to balance those emissions with food security and access, particularly in low-income regions in the global South. RMI, our approach is always to take a full systems view and to prioritize collaboration and partnering with diverse stakeholders across this complex agricultural system to address all the challenges which are tightly interconnected. So we're really proud to partner with the International Fertilizer Association to identify these near-term opportunities and to co-create pathways for a sustainable food system going forward. This 5-part webinar series really will highlight green ammonia's crucial role. And we'll explore market trends, tech innovations. We'll look at how to unlock capital, policy, and regulatory support, and how we use strategies to mobilize demand as well. We'll attack this with a global perspective. RMI works in about 67 countries today. We add that on to IFA's greater than 70 countries, and we're just about covering the entire world. And I think in the process, we can't sugarcoat the challenge, right? That ultimately decarbonizing agriculture while ensuring sustainable and resilient global food supply is an enormous and sensitive task. It's going to require bold action. It's going to require diverse perspectives, and it's going to require integration and investment across the value chain. The opportunity to transform agriculture's role in the energy transition is one of the most impactful things that we can spend our time on. And that's why we're so excited to engage you all today. Looking forward to the discussion and the insights, and to carry us further into those, I'm going to pass it back to Lachlan to lead us.
Thank you so much, John. I really liked what you said. I mean, this is going to require bold action, and it's going to require diverse perspectives. And I think we've got the perfect panel for exactly that with us here today. We have Laura Cross, Volker, Andresen, and Patrick Molloy, who I'm going to introduce one at a time, and they're going to bring in some slides, give us a, Laura's going to present a market outlook, Volker is going to present on the ammonia technology roadmap, and then Patrick will present on the status of the technology. So Laura Cross is the Director of Market Intelligence at IFA. She oversees the activities of the Market Intelligence Service, which provides authoritative information on supply, demand, and trade of fertilizers and fertilizer raw materials, and monitors developments impacting the outlook for fertilizer markets. Laura joined IFA in March 2021 and previously spent 10 years analyzing and forecasting markets at CRU Group and Integer Research. Laura unfortunately couldn't be with us today, but she has recorded a presentation, which we will play for you now.
Hi everyone, thanks for the introductions. Now I'm going to start by taking us straight into some of the recent investment in ammonia capacity. And given the focus of today's webinar on the view when it comes to green ammonia, we're going to start by looking at some of the investment levels that we see around the world across the ammonia market. Now, first things to say before I get into this chart here is in 2024, we're looking at an ammonia market of around 200 million tonnes. Now, that's spread across multiple different countries, different parts of the world that have built up an ammonia capacity base for a number of reasons. For most of the consumption, we are looking at fertilizer use. So nitrogen fertilizers that use ammonia as a building block, but then there is also a portion of industrial ammonia use, and this is in non-fertilizer sectors. Now, we of course have new emerging end uses of ammonia that will be discussed at separate times, but I just wanted to start by setting the scene of how much ammonia capacity we have in the world today. And in the short term, you can see on this slide in front of us that there is continued investment in ammonia capacity. And the different colours that you see on this chart, they show you the different feedstocks that are being invested in. And so I think that's maybe the first thing to focus on when we think about investment in new capacity. In green, you can see the electrolysis, the zero carbon green ammonia capacity that is currently in IFA's 5-year forecast. In order for projects to be considered in this forecast, they have to have reached a final investment decision, be financed, be under construction, or have what we deem to be a credible start date. So you can see that in the next 5 years, we have a decent amount of green ammonia capacity expected to commission. We do also have, as you can see here, existing conventional fossil fuel capacity that's based on coal, primarily in China, but also on natural gas in various parts of the world. And we also have natural gas combined with carbon capture, leading into the blue ammonia capacity as it is known. Now, if we focus a little bit more on the green ammonia capacity specifically, I also want to highlight the scale of green ammonia today, which it is fair to say is still relatively limited. So if we look at the situation in 2024, we've got about 100,000 tonnes of green ammonia capacity around the world. Now, a lot of this is either pilot or test phase production that existing producers are working on, or in a few cases, we have some smaller scale operational, very early stage plants that are running. Now, you can see there that we've got a mix of regions. We've got China, we've got Europe, the US and Oceania. And really here in the short term, something to pay attention to is the role of China. Now, today, China is the world's largest nitrogen producer. And if we look at the situation 5 years from now, we look to the end of IFA's medium-term forecast, you can see here that China accounts for about 50% of our capacity expectations coming directly from green ammonia. Now that's 5.2 million tonnes. That's far more significant than where we are today, of course. But I do again want to bring this back into the context of the current makeup of ammonia capacity. If we look again back to those different feedstock types, you can see that green ammonia, in this chart ironically shown in red, but it's really just to highlight to you the level of share that green ammonia accounts for. You can see it starts to increase meaningfully from about 2027, but we're still looking at a relatively small share of total ammonia capacity, at least in the medium term. So we're really just looking at the 5-year view on this slide. And a lot of that comes down to longer investment timelines needed for these projects. Some of the demand needing to emerge and actually establish itself before projects can move forward. And also just the time it takes to build one of these projects. The nitrogen market has a typical build cycle of anywhere from 3 to 4 years. And when we think about green ammonia, these are more complex projects. They have a lot more decision making and complexity attached to them. And so that's why we think in the medium term, we're not likely to see a big takeoff in the capacity that is stemming from electrolysis. I do want to end, however, by talking about the sheer scale of potential when it comes to green ammonia capacity. Now, this chart on the left-hand side, this is exactly the same scale as what I showed you on my very first slide from 2024 to 2028. We've got relatively modest levels of capacity investment for green ammonia. But if you look at that bar on the right-hand side, this shows you our total project tracking list for green ammonia. And that means it includes projects that may not yet have reached the investment decision. They may be still summing up whether it is worth investing, but it shows how much interest there has been. And it also shows how much potential demand there is on the horizon. So it's not to say that none of these projects will actually go ahead. We're just waiting to see exactly what the timeline of them is likely to be. And then last but not least, again, just touching on the different levels of expectations when it comes to the speculative projects in our capacity list that we're looking at. So you can see at the top there, there's really quite a widespread range of regions when we look at expected ammonia capacity. And this pie chart at the top here, this just shows the speculative projects. So it excludes the projects that we've already included for the next 5 years. There's really such a significant portion in Oceania. That's because of Australia's proposed hydrogen strategy, which has a lot of co-locating of ammonia plants that comes along with it. But really what I think this summarizes, and that's the key thing to take forward from the data that we see, is just how much scale of opportunity there is when we think about ammonia capacity in the future that is based on electrolysis and is green ammonia. My colleagues will cover some of the other aspects of how we reach potentially some of these figures and what is needed, but I hope that's given a good introduction to what the data looks like today, the sort of volumes that we are tracking, and I'm happy to take any questions that you may have. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Laura. I'm now going to turn over to Volker Andresen to present the Ammonia Technology Roadmap. Volker joined the International Fertilizer Association as Technical Director in 2012 and assumed the position of Sustainability Director in 2021. Volker has led the development of IFA's product stewardship certification, regular benchmarks on employee safety, production emissions, and energy efficiency, and the development of decarbonization roadmaps for ammonia production at both the global and country levels. Prior to IFA, Volker has held senior positions at IBM, Survey Sampling International, and the World Liquid Gas Association. Over to you, Volker.
Let's see if I can get up my slides. I'm more used to Teams, but that should work. Let's see if I can share. All right. Can you see this?
Yes, we can.
Oh, excellent. Thank you. So yes, good day, everyone. Hello from Paris, France. Great to be with you. My name is Volker Andresen. I'm the Sustainability Director of the International Fertilizer Association, IFA. And let me start by saying that the mission of our team, the sustainability team at the IFA, is to help our members to accelerate their sustainability transition. Now, that can take many forms and shapes. We've been given several work areas, and one of them is to develop tools for the membership. So tools we've developed for safety, for waste management, decarbonization, just to name a few. And so, yes, I've been asked to say a few words, and I don't know if I should put this on. Maybe this is even easier to see. Okay, so I've been asked to say a few words about the Ammonia Technology Roadmap project, which was published by the International Energy Agency, IEA, 3 years ago, and which we, IFA, supported with data, technical expertise from our members and more. Before I do that, let me just sort of paint the bigger picture and say that, well, according to the United Nations, fertilizers, mineral fertilizers, so nitrogen, phosphate, and potash, feed about half of the planet every day. So half of the people in this meeting, you imagine a life without food and with food, so that's due to us. And of course, the responsibility for feeding the world increases because the world population keeps growing. It's, I think, forecasted to grow by another 2 billion people by 2050. Point one. Point two is we are accounting for about 3% of the world's CO2 emissions when it comes to ammonia production. I think Alzbeta mentioned something like 1.3% just for production. And then there's another close to 1.5% when it comes to use of ammonia in agriculture. And finally, I think worth mentioning is that around 2% of the world's energy is needed for the synthesis of ammonia, and that also corresponds with about 90% of all energy being used for fertilizer production in our industry. So all this to say that we have a dual responsibility, which you can see here in the UN SDGs 2 and 13. So yes, we're feeding the world, but also we need to feed it sustainably, and that, of course, relates to climate change in this point. So the question that we asked ourselves in 2019 was, okay, so how can we decarbonize ammonia production? What can we do? Are there tools that we could build? And we have been in touch with the International Energy Agency I mentioned, that said, yes, we are writing such roadmaps, and we're happy to participate in this. And we found a sponsor in the European Bank for Reconstruction and Development. So a bank that said, we are willing to sponsor this project because in order to invest in green technology around the world, we need some solid science and a roadmap that would allow us to do so in fertilizer industry, as they have done previously in cement industry and other places. So let me say about the ammonia technology roadmap. It was a 2.5 year project, 2019 to 2021. And it is publicly available. If you would like to know more about it, please, I think Google search will get you to it very quickly. So this publicly available roadmap provides pathways to reduce 85 to 90% of CO2 emissions from ammonia production for different regions and timelines until 2050. It explores 3 possible futures to decarbonize nitrogen fertilizer sector. It outlines the roles and actions of stakeholders, qualifies the investment and policies needed, and establishes milestones for innovation and deployment. Now, what you see on the bottom right of this slide is are the 3 possible futures, or the 3 scenarios that this ammonia technology roadmap describes. The first scenario is, it's called stated policies, and basically means business as usual, maybe some technical updates and plans, but not more, which clearly, as you can see here, would lead to to decarbonize the fertilizer industry or the ammonia production by 2050. Second scenario is called the sustainable development scenario, and that is about aligning policies to the Paris Climate Agreement, so 1.5 centigrades, plus using BATs, or best available technologies. And there it was said that that would lead to 70, so 70% of carbon reductions by 2050. And finally, the third scenario here is called the net zero scenario, and that is about completely decarbonizing ammonia production, and that would lead, is forecasted to lead to 95% of decarbonization of ammonia production. So this is explaining what would it take to decarbonize the industry. It was independently written by the International Energy Agency. It was scientifically was reviewed by scientists all over the world and published just a few years ago. Now, I think what's important to say is that the fertilizer industry cannot make all of these changes just by on its own. Let me explain that. So when it comes, well, we need stakeholder collaboration. That means investors, like I mentioned, the European Bank for Reconstruction and Development, just an example. We need to have governments come to the table. We need to have technology providers develop new or upgrade existing materials, develop new technology, and Patrick will talk about it in the next presentation in a minute. And we need the enabling conditions for change. So here we're talking about investments, and if I did a back of the envelope calculation right now, I would say we will probably need something like 20 billion with a B dollars per year until 2050 to make these changes. And I'm not sure, well, I'm actually quite sure that fertilizer industry is not generating such profits. So their investments are needed in order to make the changes happen. Secondly, we need policy environment, we need the infrastructure, and very important, and I think Laura mentioned that in her previous presentation, we need research and development. We need a lot of it so that green ammonia can deliver to its promise. This ammonia technology roadmap, or ATR as we call it, was jointly presented by the IEA, International Energy Agency, European Bank for Reconstruction and Development, EBRD, and the IFA, our organization, at United Nations COP26 in Glasgow in 2021, and was well received. Now, that is a global roadmap, and I refer to it often as like a sort of a toolbox, scientifically reviewed toolbox. You have the tools that would get a country to its destination. Now, that is not a size that fits everyone, meaning every country needs to develop a local, what we call one level down, low carbon pathway, because countries have different feedstocks, countries have different infrastructures, countries have different policies and incentives in place. So one country is not the same as another. And so here, let me say that the European Bank for Reconstruction and Development has also sponsored roadmaps, 3 roadmaps already in Egypt, Turkey, and Uzbekistan, because they invest in developing countries. And that is something that now allows them to make even the bigger investments in green technologies in our sector, like they have done in cement and other sectors before. All of these 3, and I'm sure there are others, but I mean, these are 3 examples I want to give you from the EBRD. Now, all of these 3 low carbon pathways have also used information about ammonia use in agriculture. So production is the ammonia technology roadmap, but then there's also ammonia use and emissions in agriculture. And here, let me say, not topic of this call, I understand, but we have developed what we call a Scope 3 report together with the sustainability analysis of Systemic. You see here a picture of it on the right-hand side, so reducing emissions from fertilizer use, focusing on ammonia emissions. And that also is available online, publicly available, and that was presented at COP27 in Sharm el-Sheikh in 2022. We are aware that there are other decarbonization assessments that refer to the ammonia technology roadmap I described. For example, Fertilizers Europe, that's the European Fertilizer Association, developed one for the European Union. We saw that China has such an assessment that was actually co-produced with RMI, who we are partnering with on this call. And a third example would be Fertilizers Canada, which is the Canadian Fertilizer Association. But there are others, and there are more coming over time, just to say that. Let me close by taking a quick look forward. So this is what has been built so far. And of course, it's not the end of the story. It's the beginning of a journey. For sure, we will need more R&D, and Patrick will talk about green ammonia technology in just a moment. We will need more local low carbon pathways, as I just described, for a few countries. And with that, there will be policies and investments, investors even at the table over time. And here I wanted to point out two additional projects. One is that, well, I think you cannot improve what you don't measure. So we are supporting the Science-Based Target Initiative, SBTI, which you might have heard of, with the development of a sectoral decarbonization approach, SDA, for setting ammonia, carbon-intensive chemicals, and ammonia is one of them. Others are methanol, etc. And the SBTI has done similar things and already finished for automobile sector, steel sector, and others. So we're working on that. We have a decarbonization working group with more than 70 participants from about 50 countries, companies, and that is about setting scientific targets. Happy to mention also on that the ammonia technology roadmap I explained earlier and the Scope 3 report I explained just on the previous slide have been an integral part of that SBTI work and have been taken over and included. Last but not least, I want to mention that I mentioned at the beginning that N plus P plus K, so nitrogen, phosphate, and potash. Potash and phosphate are not part of the ammonia technology roadmap, are not part of the SBTI work. So we have decided to do a mining technology roadmap, including these two and other micronutrients as well, which will be similar to the ammonia technology roadmap. And that is something that we will produce next year. And maybe not even a surprise, the European Bank for Reconstruction and Development said they want to sponsor that one too. Conclusion from here is, so yes, ammonia decarbonization, the science is there. We have the ammonia technology roadmap. It needs to be taken to the local level, so country level. With that, when you have this pathway, you get attract investors, and it's helping to understand what the industry needs to do. And finally, we're trying to fill the remaining pieces, scientific gaps for phosphate and potash. And hopefully that gave you a good update about what we're working on. Back to you, Lachlan. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Volker. A lot to digest in that presentation. And as we've said in the Q&A, we will be making all these slides available after the webinar, and the recording of the webinar will be available on YouTube, so you can watch us as many times as you would like. So next, I'm going to introduce my colleague, Patrick Molloy, who is a principal with RMI's Climate Aligned Industries program, where he leads work streams focused on ammonia and fertilizers, hydrogen infrastructure, and hydrogen system innovation. Previously, he worked with RMI's Business Renewable Center, focusing on tax equity structures and PPA deal structures. Additionally, as part of RMI's mining team, he led work on mine site remediation and on-site renewable resource development. Over to you, Patrick.
Thank you, Lachlan, and good morning, good afternoon, good evening, everyone. I have the good fortune of being able to go last and present perhaps a little bit of detail around the technologies, but it is incumbent on us to I think, as I acknowledge and agree, you know, the presentations that Laura and Volker have given before this highlight the level of challenge that is in front of us, the opportunity space, but also the need for consensus to build an ecosystem around transformation. And inevitably, the question emerges, why now? What is the enabling factors? What is coming about that has created the impetus for action at this moment in time? And obviously, we have an imperative for action more generally and writ large, but also like what is going to enable this to be a realistic pathway to address some of the challenges that we're facing. So maybe to begin with, just very quickly, this is a simple technology tree overview around pathways to low carbon ammonia fertilizer production systems. And essentially we have, the conventional Haber-Bosch kind of production stream on the left-hand side, looking at SMR, steam methane reforming, production of hydrogen with carbon capture and utilization and storage attached to it. We also have a pathway around biomass gasification with similar kind of systems attached to that, leveraging the conventional Haber-Bosch production pathways. Moving to the right, we look at the electrolysis stream. So looking at alkaline electrolysis systems, which obviously alkaline systems have been deployed and operational for an extremely long period of time, but albeit we're still, in terms of total deployments, quite a small stack. We've obviously then PEM electrolysis, which is a newer technology, and then solid oxide electrolysis systems, which offer a different relative profile in operation. Then moving to the further right, we have innovation around novel non-Haber-Bosch systems. So looking at plasma catalysis, looking at electrochemical pathways, some pathways on biological kind of formations, and then photochemical. And what we mean to say in kind of flagging this at a very, very high level is that we have a series of different technology routes and pathways that get us to different relative points. And what that optionality potentially gives us is flexibility. It allows us to talk about very, very large scale ammonia production systems as we have today. It allows to talk about disaggregated kind of production. It allows to talk about leveraging different resource assets in different locations to enable us to kind of see a broader general availability, but also to talk about reducing the actual system footprint attached to a molecule, both in its production, but also in the logistics chain attached to that. So this is the joy of looking at the technologies as well that enable the roadmap that Volker talked about, and in terms of the trajectory of carbon decline, but also to enable those large market potential flags that Laura spoke to as well. So to dive right into it, looking at the conventional Haber-Bosch system, I think this chart is probably something that most folks would be generally aware of. This is leveraging, for instance, on the natural gas side, and this is a natural gas example, a steam methane reformer or potentially an autothermal reformer technology, moving into the shift reactions, moving into capturing that CCS, or sorry, capturing the carbon through CCS. And then also using conventional Haber-Bosch systems to create that ammonia. And this technology pathway is very mature. We have a significant number of facilities already demonstrating CCS technologies on steam methane reforming. There's also autothermal reformers, which are seeing very, very high rates of capture in deployment and operation. And there's more facilities underway in development. And I think, to the point, you can see in the list of folks who are looking to develop these facilities kind of globally, there's a very large number of very established companies engaging in this pathway of production. And hence 8 to 9 on a TRL estimate. This is a technology pathway that allows us to begin and also allows us to talk about conventional system operation and attachment to CCS. Moving it slightly forward, and one that just gathers some level of interest is around biomass feeds. I think more generally, talking about things like feeding, kind of biomass sourced gas, RNG style, into pyrolytic pathways, right? So creating hydrogen through the pyrolysis path, or through a steam methane or autothermal reforming pathway. There's also looking at biochemical pathways and anaerobic digestion and fermentation being pathways that are established. It's worth noting, I think, that the challenge here is that these technologies in and of themselves are somewhat or established, I should say, not even somewhat. The challenge in many of these systems is having the integrated, connected process and having that system appropriate efficiency gains. So while we see, I suppose, the biomass pathways in and of themselves being in technology specific instances actually developed and actually commercially applicable, the integration has not occurred, and therefore that indicative kind of TRL associated with, we feel, is a bit lower on the pathway. That is not to say that that won't happen, and in some locations that may be a pathway that folks will indeed track and actually engage. But for the minute, you know, these are the kind of the general challenges that we're seeing in terms of the adoption of it, which is, you know, looking at that high capital cost, the feedstock consistencies, and then sourcing, transportation costs, things like that are all kind of slowing the potential pathway of adoption on this one. Then moving very swiftly forward, and one that we've talked about a little already, water electrolysis. So looking at effectively leveraging an electrochemical process to split water molecules into hydrogen and oxygen. We've seen an awful lot of interest in this pathway, obviously, over the last few years. Certainly, we have at least 3 major technologies trees within that I've mentioned. So to the point, you know, renewable energy into an electrolyzer, splitting a water molecule into then essentially a Haber-Bosch system to create the ammonia. So water or alkaline electrolysis, first commercialized in the 1920s, but also has had reasonably limited deployment since then. PEM electrolysis, arguably a simpler balance of plant system, so it has some level of flexibility, perhaps on a more modular basis. But also created, I think, the first systems were in and around the 1960s. And then solid oxide electrolysis, which offers a different relative kind of positioning because of the kind of the thermal energy and heat management features to it. So operationally, just a different type of system, different profile of system, but slightly earlier perhaps on the cycle. I think what's most important here and to the point is to achieve the cost reductions, to see you know, a very abundant kind of deployment of these systems. You also need deployment in and of itself, and that's where a lot of the kind of policy, the investment profiles, the kind of support kind of resources that were spoken about previously are really important in enabling early technologies. So to the point, we've seen an awful lot of different companies and different projects emerge over the last number of years. You know, this is an indicative chart, but certainly there could be many more, and there certainly has been some projects that have shut down as well over the last year. But essentially, the announced or publicized projects, there are a very substantial number of them in the offing. What's most interesting here is that these flexibilities on technology give us this kind of range of potential modular and distributed system, all the way up to very large scale systems. There's also some level of flexibility that can be engaged and approached on this. And also it can add to kind of the separation from conventional feedstock markets. So when we look to the general landscape, and appreciating that I haven't spoken to everything on the list here, but just in the interest of time, I think it's salient to focus on kind of the major themes, but there's certainly an awful lot more, and we have done an awful lot of work at looking at the disaggregated system potential. But this is a very innovative space, and there's an optionality and a flexibility that comes with each of these technology streams that gives us reasonable confidence on the potential of the sector to reach the pathway that was projected earlier. So looking from beginning on the left-hand side, some of these kind of photochemical processes, biological and electrochemical processes, perhaps earlier, but still with very significant and interesting potential operational systems, all the way out through to, you know, the kind of PEM systems, alkaline systems, and conventional systems with CCS attached to them. What I think the takeaway here fundamentally is that we are looking at a system change opportunity that previously we have not had. And that is both incredibly timely because of the potential adoption of ammonia in so many other sectors, but also for some of the questions and conversations that are going on around optimizing fertilizer choice to manage soil health, soil conditions, and addressing our carbon and footprint associated, or carbon equivalent footprint associated with many of the production streams. So in a sense, this is a reason for optimism, but there is also a significant body of work around deployment required to commercially realize the potential of these technology streams and to reach alignment with that kind of net zero pathway that I think Volker showed earlier on. And with that, thank you very, very much. Look forward to your questions. And yeah, Lachlan, I think back over to you.
Great. Thank you so much, Patrick. And as he mentioned, we've got a lot of questions in the chat. And if you would like to ask a question, please feel free. I'll try to get to as many of them as I can, although we don't have a huge amount of time left in this webinar. So maybe starting with you, Patrick, just following on from what you gave us in that presentation, I guess my question is, should we be optimistic about the future of this technology space around ammonia? And, you know, if you are optimistic, what's driving that optimism for you?
Yeah, I mean, I am an optimist by nature, so I inevitably will have to answer that question with yes. But I think what drives my reason for optimism is that, you know, with these technologies at the stage that they are, and the continued innovation around them, that alone is encouraging. What's a reason for optimism is that we are seeing, you know, the incentive structures that have come out in the US over the last number of years. I think Australia announced one, Japan and Korea, or South Korea, I should say, announced one very recently as well. We're seeing investment in real projects that are in related technologies. We're seeing that in Europe. We're seeing that in the Middle East. We're seeing that in Africa as well. So we're seeing an awful lot of actual engagement around these technologies and the related technology. And the key effort here has to be around deployment. When we start to see first projects built, when we start to see second projects built, that builds the kind of the knowledge base. It builds our certainty around operation. It builds confidence for investors. It builds certainty around what the policy and regulatory needs are around these things. And by virtue of having these first deployments, as well as the stream of potential additional projects that will be built, that's very, very encouraging. The only last bit that I would add is that, you know, to Volker's point earlier, the fertilizer sector can't do this on its own. And by virtue of the fact that we're seeing ammonia now being talked about very actively as a potential fuel in the shipping sector, with the expectation of IMO guidance coming forth, the fertilizer sector doesn't have to do this on its own. This is an opportunity for cross-sectoral collaboration to have a very, very deep decarbonization impact. And that in and of itself should give us some confidence.
Love to hear that. I desperately need optimism at this time. So I appreciate your take. Volker, perhaps one for you. I'm hoping you can be optimistic about this one, but I'm interested in the investment barriers to decarbonizing ammonia production. You know, we're obviously a long way from a totally green sector, and there's a lot that stands in between us, you know, today and us getting there. So, you know, what are those barriers in your mind, and what can the fertilizer industry do to overcome them?
Big questions for me. I'm also an optimist, and I think you just have to be, especially when you have children. So let me say, well, I guess barriers and challenges, there unfortunately more than one that I can think of. I mean, of course, cost, it's everything we're talking about here is pretty capital intensive, right? You want to transition to green hydrogen or implement carbon capture technologies, costs money. You want to change infrastructure, that doesn't come overnight. I mean, you want to make a green hydrogen production and distribution possible in a new country. You know, this is money intensive, unfortunately. Also, I think you need quite a bit of coordination. So I think the good thing is that nobody is doing this by himself, and that's what Patrick, I think, also said before. So I like to think of like sort of a triangle, like the government needs to play hand in hand with the industry, and we need to play hand in hand with science. And so together we can actually attract investment, and coordination, I think, for scaling up is very important. And then wherever you are, I mean, you need to deal with what renewable energy sources do you have available. I think I'm based in France. I saw somewhere we have like more than 130 participants in this course. So I think all of us, or many of us, have like their own view on how to do this best. So that might be a limiting factor. And finally, yeah, we need I think people like to call it carrots and sticks sometimes. It's like I mean, look at the US. There was is the IRA, which is sort of a carrot. Then you go to other places. I'm based in the European Union, so I would say like maybe here you see more of sticks, but maybe a mix of the two can do magic and help us to fulfill the vision.
Thanks, Volker. One question I have is, we've talked obviously about the importance of fertilizer to global food production. As you mentioned, half of global food production relies on this process. But we haven't really talked a lot about farmers, about the potential impacts of green ammonia on that food production. We have a few questions in the Q&A on arid climates, for example. So perhaps a question to both of you. First, is there are there benefits outside of sort of decarbonization to farmers from moving to a green ammonia production? And two, are there sort of particular benefits in arid climates from this shift? So maybe starting with you, Patrick, and then Volker, if there's anything you'd like to add.
Yeah, I think maybe to give some kind of context around how we started looking at some of the potential smaller scale systems being deployed. We've seen such volatility over the last number of years in the ammonia price in certain regions that inherently that risk is carried by farmers, right? It is an exposure that is, to use the financial parlance of it, it's unhedged, right? So to that degree, either governments have to lean in to support farmers, or farmers have to bear a cost that they have no control over. And inherently, that is not a good conditional kind of exposure or system. And to that point, the more you can certainly link to consistently performing kind of renewable energy sources, for example, or consistently performing, like I'm thinking things like hydroelectric to apply to this, you can stabilize some level of supply price. And that in and of itself is a good thing for stakeholders, whether they be farmers or whether they are local kind of government folks, whether they are national government folks, but it is a stabilizing potential aspect. And that management of commodity market volatility is a benefit or co-benefit that we can see across a number of these technology streams. I've just picked the one that we started on, but that is a valid and important aspect. To the question around arid climates, I mean, in plenty of places we see efforts around desalination and project development, and the relative cost point for desalinated water, not to say that it's extremely cheap, but it is a credible pathway to supply water for water electrolysis if you go that route. But there can be other pathways, and there can be other technology trees looking at kind of, and some of the more emergent streams to look at kind of advanced molecules and production. The other aspect of this is around varied and available supply. If you are in a region that's proximate to, a region that will have kind of abundant and easy supply, localization of some of the supply chains is going to stabilize markets as well. So I think what's more important here than trying to say a stream works in a place is to look at the toolbox of optionality that now emerges, and what that does to generally stabilize the availability and pricing within the fertilizer system that has seen some volatility over the last number of years. But I'm sure Volker has some additional thoughts here as well.
I would say, I think Patrick covered already a lot. I did mention earlier that about half of the CO2 emissions come in our industry, or from ammonia, come from fertilizer use in agriculture. So we know that farmers want to help, There are ways to go about it. I mean, we talk about, for example, the 4 R's, let's say, smart use of fertilizers, the right time, the right amount, and more. We talk about special fertilizers. You can have special coating. You have, let's say, smart fertilizers. An issue that exists, though, is somebody has to pay the bill in the end. I think that is where things fall a little bit short at the moment. In the end, the question that remains to be answered is, okay, so who is going to pay the extra? Would a farmer choose green ammonia or classic ammonia? Needs to be addressed and needs to be fixed, and that is something, as I mentioned, for local carbon pathways, for local discussions. That's the government, the industry, and more. So I think it needs to get more people to the table to address it and make it digestible and have farmers contribute to the solution.
Thanks, Volker. We've had a few questions in the chat about exactly that question, and so maybe I'll just probe you a little bit further on that in terms of like what is the willingness to pay for green ammonia in the fertilizer market, and sort of what kind of premium can we expect? What kind of premium do we currently have? And then perhaps a question for Patrick: how do we drive that green premium down and get closer to cost competitiveness, so that willingness to pay question isn't so top of mind? So perhaps starting with you, Volker.
Say that I'm not an agronomist. I'm not a market intelligence director like Laura, who couldn't be with us today, is currently for IFA in India. But I mean, I think ultimately what we will see, and this is my personal forecast, is that the prices will go down and it will become more affordable. The willingness is there, but so often in life, I think everyone has to play a role in this, including the consumer, so that farmers are not running out of profits, and that they are willing to afford green ammonia. I think this would be just my quick comment on this.
Great. Patrick, anything to add on that one?
I'll just reiterate the point on technology cost decline profiles, which is when we see deployment, we see improvements in manufacturing and error rates. We see investment to drive down those costs, and therefore this is why these first projects are important for driving that affordability factor. So yeah, that's all I'd just reiterate there again.
Great. Well, thank you so much. I think that brings us to time, and I want to be respectful of all our participants' time. I'm sure we all have more webinars and more meetings to get to, but I really appreciated this conversation. I've learned a lot, and hopefully our audience has as well. I know we haven't had a chance to get to every question. There was simply too much to cover and too much interest. But that's exactly why this is a 5-part webinar series. So you'll have more opportunities to come back and ask questions of our participants. So here on the slide, you can see our upcoming webinars in the series on the green ammonia innovation ecosystem, on investments to unlock the green ammonia future, a specific webinar on policy and regulation, and then finally one on building differentiated demand for low carbon fertilizers. So keep your eyes peeled for those webinars as they get scheduled, and we'd just like to thank everyone for their time and appreciate you, and we'll see you next time. Thank you very much.